Hey, how's it going? I'm Ella Feingold. I'm an orchestrator. I hope you're doing really, really well today. Um, Sorry for my absence. Work picked up and just didn't have time to do any videos. But today's gonna sort of just be a quick one. Someone had asked me about my scoring template and just software that I use and workflow and whatnot. So I thought I would just quickly sort of show what I work with. So this is Avid Sibelius. It's the most current version, and I basically use Sibelius. I took a picture here of my iPad template, which I can move my big head out of the way. And so this is something I set up as a means to just work faster. This particular app is called Touch OSC, and it uses a software called Osculator to communicate to Sibelius. So each one of these buttons here are things that I'm able to access quickly that I need to access quickly. So that's the iPad, and the only other third-party software I use, well, I guess there's two more. One is called Keyboard Maestro, and that I use for a lot of word menus. Like, for example, if I wanted to put in triumphantly here, I could push a button on my iPad and I would get this whole word menu that would come up with things that I've set as presets, like certain text things like triumphant and marquee stack and all of these different things, so I don't have to type them in. So that's what Keyboard Maestro does. And I also use a piece of software called Transcribe. I use that if I have to do takedowns or hear things slow down. So that's a great piece of software as well. And, I also use a DAW. I have all of them. I have Pro Tools and Cubase and Logic, Digital Performer, and whatnot. I typically like to use Cubase. For those that don't know, and I think I talked about this in another video called Orchestrating for the Microphone, but when we are orchestrating for MIDI composers, we receive a MIDI file that was composed in a DAW. And the reason for going into the DAW and checking the MIDI file and looking at things is we need to look at CC automation and controller information, and so that gets interpreted as hairpins. So you may click on a piano roll and you may see all kinds of automation being written, and that translates, one of the parameters it translates into is hairpins. So that's why we use a DAW. I like to use Cubase just because I find that it's easier to see all of the information and it's a lot cleaner. So those are just the tools, I guess, pieces of software that I use. This lighting makes me look like a vampire. I don't know what's going on here ever since I switched over to my big screen. And then I guess I should say my screen, I'm running an iMac, and for orchestration you don't need a lot of power at all. But I have this like 42-inch Dell monitor, and it's massive. And the reason that I like to use a huge monitor is because I orchestrate a lot in panorama mode, which all scoring softwares have. And so this allows me, depending on the length of the cue, this allows me to see the whole piece of music globally. So I can really see the architecture. And what I like to do is go left to right on certain sections and zooming in and zooming out. So that's why I have a large monitor. So anyways, so back to the template itself. So this is a custom template I've made over on and off the last 4 or 5 years, I'd say. I'm always tweaking things in the part template, in the full score. I guess as a disclaimer, This template is made to be very easily sight readable. This is not particularly like a template I would use for my own orchestrations, but it works wonderful for, film and video game and concert music because everything is really chunky, and you can see things really well. There's a lot of bold fonts and stuff like that. So, to get into some of the nerdy things, I mean, we could talk about this for a long time, but I'll just point out a couple of things that you might not be aware of. So things that I've customized are like using engraver text T for the tempo indications because it's a really chunky note head rather than say like Opus or something. So that's one thing. I increased the staff lines so they're a little bit chunkier. And I've also made these bar lines incredibly thick to really mark out the bars. Some orchestrators prefer to have a really light, background with bar lines and staff lines. I prefer, a little bit chunkier, I guess. So what else here? I chose to take different music fonts and combine them together. So like this accent is from Maestro, and I chose this and pulled it from Maestro as well as the articulation dot because the aperture opens really big and it just like pops on the page and it sort of looks out of place. Things like beam angles, I measured the beams from the old French engraved score, and so my beam angles here are a little more pronounced than a lot of other orchestrators' templates or software in general. So, I'm trying to sort of combine elements that are beautiful, engraved, music from the 1900s or whatnot, and also just some very clean, crisp looking things that are very sight readable. The two other categories I would say are line styles. I have made a lot of custom line styles like this overdub line here, and things like cue lines, which I can show you, rip for horn rips, right hand, left hand. I use these brackets a lot for harp. Yeah, so things like that. Other, custom line styles, vibrato to non-vibrato, where you can drag this out. So it's a lot of just particular line styles that I need. And the last thing, which I could, again, make a custom video about here, but I have a lot of plugins that I've made over the years, and so just to kind of show, let's see here, where are my plugins? Well, I'll show you one plugin that I made here, and this is called Cluster Lines. And what this does is use sort of approximates some of the Penderecki notation. So what you could do is, move this up. And you'll see. So it turns into a cluster. So for me, I use tons and tons of Sibelius plugins. Tons. I mean, literally, these are a lot of them, and you can see in my custom folder that these are all ones that I've, paid for and created. And it's just something I like to use for my workflow just because My goal is to create beautiful engraved music and beautiful refined orchestration under the deadline of film music, which is insane sometimes in video game music. I mean, sometimes you're orchestrating the night before a session and there's no time to make something beautiful, or sometimes there's no time to really refine something and it's sort of just good enough. Just get it out of the door. And so with this kind of template and plugins and keyboard shortcuts and all that, it allows me to work at a very, very fast speed and still being incredibly refined and mindful and whatnot. So that's this video. If anyone has any other questions about stuff, I guess one thing I'll say is that I have all of the notation softwares. I have Dorico, I have Finale. I think they're all great. I just happen to have learned on Sibelius, and so that's what I use. And if you are a beginning orchestrator or wanting to, apprentice or work for other orchestrators, as someone who's prepping things or whatnot, it's good to have all of the softwares and to be comfortable with them, all of the different DAWs, all of the different engraving software, etc. So anyway, stay weird, be kind, don't forget to love yourself and each other, and I'll catch you on the next one. Thank you.